So whenever we decide what we're going to talk about every single week, we have like a document just to give people inside baseball and how we've been prepping for
It's
these.
huge.
Okay, I feel like that was a bit of a soft jab at me, and I would like to just preface this by saying that I like to channel stuff. And when I channel stuff, I channel a lot of stuff at once. And I don't know, the ideas were flowing. Okay.
It's great. I love it. I feel like if anything, I'm like, Amanda, should I be contributing more? Because I feel like you've put
You don't have
1
to because
million
I've got
ideas.
it covered.
I know, that's what I'm
We do,
torn between.
it is a long, it is a long document. So we have a really long document of potential like episode topics. And funnily enough, I came up with one the other day, not in the document. And I was like, yo, we could cover this at some point. And Kelly right away was like, let's do that. Let's do that next. And so I would love to know, well, say the topic, and then I would love to know, like, what about this appealed to you? So
Yeah.
today we're going to be kind of dissecting the desire for all of us to feel seen, but not be seen.
Mhm. I think that when you said it, there was just this immediate resonance with like not even really understanding in my mind, but just knowing in my felt sense, like I know exactly what that means. Like I resonate with it. Like that desire to feel seen but not be seen. Like that was it felt like you took something that at least but I really believe that so many people could probably relate to, but they've never actually heard it before. But as soon as we hear it, it's like, I know exactly what that means. And it's such an interesting paradox to want to feel seen, but not be seen. And only like 5 minutes ago did I actually really sit with what I think resonates about that so much. And what does that actually really mean? Like, what do we mean by I want to feel seen?
Yeah,
And what would we mean by, yeah,
please
I
go
don't
into
want to be
that.
seen?
Yeah. Like, what does it
Yeah.
mean to feel seen or to desire to feel seen?
I think the difference between feeling seen and being seen is that to feel seen, really what we mean by that is we want to be validated. We want to be or feel significant or important in the world. And when we say that we don't want to be seen, I think what we really mean by that is we don't want to feel the vulnerability that comes from the threat of rejection or the threat of abandonment that we associate with being seen a certain way.
I don't think that people recognize that there is a difference. I think a
Yeah.
lot of us desire to feel seen, but we don't recognize that there's a part of us that doesn't want to actually be seen. We want to feel seen, but there's something vulnerable about being seen. And I tend to agree with you. Feeling seen comes down to feeling a sense of connection to someone, not feeling so alone, feeling validated and justified in how you feel and how you see yourself in the world around you. And so we tend to seek out people that we know are going to give that to us. So we
Mm.
talk about how we feel to someone that has a sense of like-mindedness, and then when they can validate how we feel, oh, we feel so seen. Oh, they understand me. I feel connected to them. I feel comfortable within myself around them. And then the difference is when you're connecting or having a conversation with someone where you don't feel seen. I think that that's a really interesting kind of nuance to explore. Are they not seeing you, or are they really seeing you to the point where you're feeling unseen because of how vulnerable
Yeah.
you're feeling? I would
Yeah.
love
Or
your
you're
take on
feeling
that.
judged and
Yes.
unaccepted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is really the perfect recipe for breeding inauthenticity in us. Because if we desire to feel seen, which is
I love
really
that.
just to feel validated, accepted, connected, then inevitably we're going to mold ourselves into being who we think we need to be in order to achieve that, in order to receive others' acceptance and connection, and also reject the parts of ourselves or hide parts of ourselves that we think aren't worthy of that connection and acceptance from someone else. And on the same side of that, or another side of that same coin, we're going to, in the pursuit of not wanting to be seen, we're gonna, yeah, hide the parts of ourselves that we think are going to be rejected or that would confirm to us our deepest fears that we're not worthy. And so we are essentially creating versions of ourselves in order to meet these desires and these needs, but we are in the process of losing what's true and authentic to us in the process of trying to feel. I think at the end of the day, it is that sense of safety and worthiness. But it's ironic because in the process of doing it, we're actually blocking ourselves from feeling truly safe because we're putting our safety in the hands of someone outside of us accepting us, which some people might not have the capacity to do based on a lot of factors that have nothing to do with us. And we're also putting our ability to feel significant or good enough or worthy on something outside of us, which is inevitably going to make us feel unworthy because we don't feel it inherently.
Why do you, and is that why you think that we seek it from other people? Because we don't know how to self-validate or to feel comfortable within ourselves or to feel a sense of connection with who we actually are. And so we seek it from somebody else.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's that we don't know how, or if it's that we don't feel like it's okay to. And I think I might resonate a little bit more with the latter, that it doesn't feel okay to self-validate because what if I'm wrong? Or what if there's these ideas that I've associated with a lot of experiences I had when I was younger that were kind of conditioned into me around, it's not okay for me to feel good about myself or to feel confident because if I go into some experience, let's say, like I'm getting ready for the day and I put on my really cute, like sparkly, bejeweled, like bright pink crown shirt and I pigtail my hair and I think it looks awesome. And I'm self-validating myself that I think I look good and that I'm cool or whatever. And then later have that unconfirmed by someone making fun of me or bullying me or rejecting me for the very thing that I thought was cool, then the pain of that feels so big. And it also creates this idea that had I gone into the day not feeling good about myself or not self-validating or not feeling confident about how I looked or what I was wearing, etc., then maybe the pain of being bullied or rejected wouldn't have hurt so bad.
I would love to break down the nuance with what you're saying between someone who is invalidating how you feel and someone who just has a different perspective, maybe from the one that you're holding, and both can lead you to feel unseen,
Yeah.
right? But the energy of the other person is completely different. Do you know what I mean by that?
I think I understand what you mean. I'll reflect back to what I'm hearing and kind of where my mind went when I was listening to you is that, like, obviously, when we're younger, we take everything personally. Like, we are going to take someone's opinion as truth so that we can try to, like, figure out how the world works so that we can keep ourselves safe. So if someone else thinks that we're not good enough or we're not pretty or that we don't look good when we wear the bedazzled bright pink sparkly shirt, then we are going to own that as our own truth, not take it as they just have a different opinion and they're entitled to it, but take it as that's the truth that I need to embody so that I can protect myself from this emotional pain. And I think what's interesting about when we come into the world of self-healing and personal development and trying to heal ourselves and all of that is we learn about this idea and maybe we read motivational quotes and books and all of that. It's like, let people have their experience of you and you should be confident and fuck what other people think and all of that. And we almost layer all of that new perspective onto all of this old gunk and conditioning that we had to try to protect ourselves. And we find ourselves in this really weird place of like, I should know better. quote unquote, it's a place we all come up to, right? Where it's like, I know it doesn't matter what they think about me, but I'm really triggered by this person not liking me. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And so I think that there's something really interesting about like how when we are not being externally validated and the ways that we think we need to be, at least like I need this person to validate that I am okay or that I am beautiful or that I am worthy of love or whatever, even when we can recognize that maybe that person doesn't have the capacity to and that they don't need to and that it really has nothing to do with me if they don't have the ability to validate it, it still feels hard, scary, or threatening in some way, shape, or form to live as if that's true and validate ourselves regardless of how other people outside of us are experiencing us.
And when someone outside of you is speaking about you or something in the world through a really compassionate lens, and it's coming from a really heartfelt place, and yet you're still feeling unseen in that moment from them, right? Like there's the scenario of you going out wearing this out funky outfit, and then someone is saying, well, I don't like how that looks. I don't like how that looks on you. That's not fashionable. And that can be difficult to hear, and it can be very easy to feel unseen in that moment. But what if they're not even commenting on you at all and they just have a different perspective than you? And let's say you come to them looking for validation and you're not receiving it in the way that you wanted to. So they're both separate situations where you leave both of them feeling completely unseen, where one of them is purposely invalidating how you feel about yourself because they're maybe attempting to tear you down in some capacity. And the other one is just mirroring to you a different point of view where you're feeling triggered, but the energy behind it is a very compassionate one. So in both situations, you walk away feeling unseen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's not even sometimes situation dependent. It's how what the other person is mirroring back to you essentially in that moment that is leading you to feel unseen. And they might actually be seeing you very well,
Mm.
right? But it's your
Yeah.
interpretation of not getting the justification and the validation in the way that you wanted it going in that is leading
Mm.
you to walk away feeling differently.
Yeah. And it's the meaning that we automatically attach to the experience of being invalidated in that way. Like if someone is just kindly, compassionately mirroring a different perspective of like, I don't like pink shirts. Like I don't like when your hair is pigtailed or whatever because it
Bedazzling
makes me
doesn't look
think,
good on me.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Then if we feel hurt or threatened by that, then I think we need to look deeper than just they don't like what I'm wearing. It's not about that. It's about what we're making that mean. That because they don't like it, then I've done something wrong, or my opinion was wrong, or that this person doesn't like me, or that other people aren't going to find me attractive, or there's going to be different stories that are familiarly spinning through our mind that our mind is going to attach to the experience of someone invalidating us. And I think that we're going to be sensitive to doing that in different times of our life. Like, I think especially there are times where I'm a little bit more like, yeah, people can have their experience of me and it's okay. And I'm going to wear what I want to wear and I'm going to do what I want to do. And it's not really going to matter as much how other people interpret that because I see that being having nothing to do with me. And I can live as if that's true. I always know it's true, but I can really experience it more fully in my life. And then there's moments where I'm on the complete opposite end of the spectrum and terrified of other people experiencing me in a way that I deem as negative. Even in the experience that you're describing, where it's not as blatantly negative, it's more just a person expressing their experience or their opinion on something, a differing opinion than I have, where even that feels really threatening. And I think I'm more sensitive to it when, just as a general consensus of my whole life, I'm feeling like my need for feeling significant or loved or connected or even just feeling worthy in some way, shape, or form is threatened or it doesn't feel fully fulfilled because of other things that are happening in my life too.
So for a client, for example, that is going out into the world and noticing they're, reflecting on going out into the world and recurringly feeling unseen by those around them, regardless of what the circumstance is. And they're aware of the fact that it's not that they are feeling unseen, they are unseen by an aspect of themselves. What is
Mm.
actually going on there? And then how do you coach a client to work on that so that this pattern resolves itself and they're no longer looking outside of themselves for the validation that they're really seeking?
Yeah, maybe what needs to happen first is they just need to acknowledge, like you said, what's actually happening when they're feeling unseen. Because it's not that they're unseen, it's that they are rejecting a part of themselves, and that's maybe being mirrored by someone outside of them rejecting them, or at least that's the story that they're telling themselves. But when we peel the layers back enough, it's that this thing about me is wrong, or I'm inherently flawed and fatally flawed in some way. And so when that this part of me is seen, I feel rejected, but I'm calling that unseen.
Yeah. I feel like this is a conversation about shame.
It always is, isn't it?
I know. And I feel like we should talk about that. I would love to have a conversation around what shame is and why we feel shame, and also like what it means to actually feel unworthy, which is something that we've kind of talked about before. And I feel like sometimes that's also a catch all kind of phrase where we talk about, well, I don't feel worthy, like what that actually
Yeah.
means. And I feel like when it coming back to shame, if we were to start there, it's a belief system that something about you is wrong and should be different than the way it is. And if it was different, you would feel better about yourself.
Mm.
And
Yes.
and where that comes from and then what to do about that.
Yeah. It's so interesting when we explore the worthiness topic because I think when anytime I've worked with someone where they've been self-aware enough to be able to identify that they have some kind of unworthiness wound or they don't feel worthy, there's always this like also acknowledgement of like, but I know that I am and I have love in my life. People do love me. So obviously I'm worthy of love. And so there's kind of this like wall that we hit in that exploration as far as like, I feel unworthy, but I know it's not true. And then we don't really know where to go from there. And I think it's because we're not hitting the core of what that really means. When we say that we feel unworthy, it's really just this fear that we are wrong, whatever that really means, that there's something fatally flawed about us. And if that was true, who knows why? But it feels like the absolute worst case scenario in the whole world.
To me, unworthiness comes from this fear that you're not inherently capable of the thing that you want, and that means that you are flawed in some capacity, right? And
Yes.
so you are giving your like you're putting your sense of self in how you desire to validate that outside of you. And I feel like this is kind of where I've noticed my work come in terms of channeling people's souls, where there is the human experience of worth, and then there is the soul perspective of worth, right? Where the ego requires a job. And we all have this. It's part of our biology. It's the mind's desire to feel accomplished. And it feels really good when it accomplishes something. And so we kind of associate accomplishment with an extension of I've earned this. I've earned my ability to validate myself. And then from the soul perspective, you're just worthy for just being. And then it
Yes.
becomes this kind of back and forth of I have to earn it, but I already am worthy of it. And I guess that comes back to what you were saying, where there's these two parts of you that are kind of at war with one another, and it's about, okay, how do I find the happy medium between them?
Yes. I love that you're bringing in this soul aspect of worth, because it reminds me of something that one of a mentor that we've both had actually has shared this. So I'll reference her because I think it was her that came up with it, but maybe not. But Alyssa Nobriga talks about the different levels of worth, where there's the worth from the unhealthy ego or the unintegrated ego, where it just says, I'm not worthy. And then a movement in the right direction from that place would come to healthy and integrated ego, which says, I am worthy. But then there's an aspect of that level of egoic worth, like I am worthy, that still feels in some way, shape, or form like conditional.
Right.
It doesn't feel like it's actually fully embodied. It still feels better than I'm not worthy, but it's still like I'm worthy. Look at me, I'm accomplishing these things. Or look at me, I am worthy because I have people that love me. Or look at me, I am worthy because of some XYZ condition that we're using to justify outside of us why we are worthy and capable in XYZ. And so the next level up from that healthy ego, I am worthy, is the soul's I'm beyond worthy, or I'm inherently worthy, which is a weird concept, I think, for a lot of us to grasp, because I think in some way it sounds a bit arrogant. Like, I
It
am beyond
feels
worthy.
foreign and it feels wrong, like on
It
some
does.
capacity, to be like, well, I don't need to do anything to feel good about myself.
Yeah,
There's something I find that there's something inherently threatening about that. You
it
know, to
is. Yeah.
to to stop focusing on accomplishing something or doing something, and to give myself permission to just own it and provide it freely.
Maybe a part of the reason why that feels so threatening is because we've only ever experienced us being in the world and doing in the world and accomplishing in the world from this place of I need to earn my worth. Therefore, there might be this unconscious association or meaning that if I just felt worthy, regardless of what I did or didn't do, then I would just not do anything and I would just become a
Yes.
wasted space.
Yes. Or I would realize that I was wrong after all, or it would be taken away from me, or I would be
Right,
invalidated in some way. And then it comes full circle
right,
where,
exactly. And we end up in a worse place.
mhm.
Yeah.
And I asked my guides about that. I was like, what's the point of like dealing with this BS ego that is kind of, it's almost like it's like forcing this like continued effort of do over and over and over again for like a lifetime, and you're withholding your the essentially what you want, what we all want is to feel loved. That's what this is all about. You're working to feel that. Like, if we are that, then why do we come to Earth to spend a lifetime working towards earning it? And it's honestly just to have the experience of witnessing that duality and then kind of unattaching yourself from it. And I feel like that comes back full circle to what we were talking about at the beginning with wanting to feel seen but not be seen, where it's like, if I feel seen, I can feel justified, and almost like I can feel justified in who I am right now without needing to
Mm.
change anything. But if I am seen, then maybe they're seeing a version of me that I've been hiding from and I've been pretending doesn't exist because of the amount of shame I hold around that aspect of who I am. And then that requires me to do something about it,
Mm.
which I
Yeah.
think is really interesting.
And if I don't do something about it, then the shame spiral continues. Then what's
Yeah.
wrong with me? And then I'm not ever going to be happy or lovable, or everything that I've ever wanted and loved is going to be taken away from me. Like, we catastrophize it in that way, but I think there's some level of what we believe is truth about even those silly points.
Yeah. So when you have a client that is having trouble owning their inherent worth,
Mm.
or they're constantly in the cycle of, and I know that this is something that you've seen and see often, where it's almost like we project this desire to change something in order to earn it, right? Well, I can't just feel it. Something has to change in order for me to be able to kind of have my doorway in. And a lot of the times we feel focus on our body, for example, to do that. How do you break that pattern of constantly feeling like something has to change first in order for then you to be able to grant the worthiness freely to yourself?
Yeah. Someone has to have a reason to want to change that operating system. And I think that's where we need to start, because if they have up until now only experienced that they get some level of success or feel some level of better through the external achievement of something that they've told themselves they need to achieve in order to feel better, then that at least feels good enough to them to maybe not want to do anything about it until they explore maybe what the repercussions of the operating system really are, and maybe how it's actually not working as well. And when we're talking about the idea of changing something externally to feel something differently on the inside, my main experience with this is body stuff, which you mentioned. And so trying to change how we look to feel better about ourselves or to feel more confident. And a process I've had to take myself through, and many people that I've worked with through, is just acknowledging how well that's worked. And when we really investigate that, we start to see that maybe there were fleeting moments of feeling better. We look in the mirror and we see that something has changed and we feel validated and feeling better, or we give ourselves permission to feel better. But we think it's because we look different, because society tells us that when we look this way, we're more lovable, we're more attractive, whatever. And so we have experienced seeing our body change or doing something repetitively to make our body change and then feeling better about ourselves because of it. So it's not that it hasn't worked, but let's look at the extent to which it has worked. Because I know I'm not the only one that has experienced feeling horrible about myself when I had the body that I thought I needed in order to feel good about myself. Like, I did bodybuilding competitions. I was a personal trainer. I had people literally paying me to help them look like me. And I still felt like shit about myself pretty regularly. And the only difference was that I felt slightly less justified in feeling how shit I felt about myself. Like, if I sat with it and I'm like, I feel like shit about myself. And then I'm like, why? Well, I shouldn't, because like I should be grateful that I have this body and other people seem to think that it's okay and blah, blah, blah. So I could mentally justify the feelings away a little bit, but they never actually went away. They were still there. It was still my authentic experience of myself, was that I wasn't enough and that there was something wrong with me. And so it never went away when I changed the thing externally. And I still tried for many years to change the thing externally regardless. I'm like, oh, it wasn't getting to this body weight that made me happier. So now I got to reach a lower body weight. And it wasn't
Yeah.
that body weight either. Oh, maybe my butt needs to be bigger then. And then I make my butt bigger and I do like 17,000 hip thrusts. And no, still don't feel good about myself. So maybe I need to do something else with my body to make it better and grow my hair longer and dress differently and put self tanner on and whatever. Still nothing, still nothing. I had to learn the lesson over the course of like 10 years until I was finally like, okay, this isn't working.
Yeah.
Um, Chasing this feeling that I want to feel internally through external changes hasn't sustainably created that inner change that I was looking for. It gave me moments of it,
And
but the
so,
moments of it, maybe they didn't actually have anything to do with the external, anyways.
well, I think that this is a very interesting segue into the difference between the internal and external experience. And I feel like we tend to get to conflate the two, where we tend to assume in order for me to feel differently inside, something outside of me needs to change. And what you're saying is that's not always the case. And very often that's a it's a misunderstanding, and we just can end up focusing on something different outside of us, hoping that that's going to be the thing and that's going to be the thing. Oh no, it's going to be this. And you're essentially running from the shame that you feel, and the shame that you feel is the very thing that is perpetuating this cycle. And at the end of the day, what you're looking for is to feel differently. And so you kind of have to go right to the source. And what's creating the shame, would you say, is a perspective, thought, or belief system that you're holding about who you are?
Yeah, I think that's what's lodged the shame in us from the beginning. What keeps us, what keeps it there is a couple of things. One is the perpetual believing of those priorly conditioned beliefs about our worth
Yeah.
and about what makes us worthy and whether we're good enough or not, etc. But it also is just our unwillingness to process that shame. I think we need to get
Yeah.
it from both sides. It's not just about mentally convincing ourselves that I am worthy and I am good enough and blah, blah, blah. And now the shame will go away. No, I don't think it works like that. At least that hasn't been my experience. There's shame. Like, shame is, oh gosh, what is shame? Like, shame is so many things we could call it. But I think the way I've conceptualized it is a belief system of about our worth and about our good enoughness or enoughness, but it's also an energy. It's like it's a contraction that lives in our body that is just activated by those belief systems and those thoughts. And so when we're holding this energy of shame in our body, in our nervous system, and we have this deeply wired contraction in our bodies that seems to just always be there. And maybe sometimes we're not aware that it's there, but it always seems to come up eventually. Then really it's not just going to go away because we change our belief systems or choose to believe that we are worthy and we are enough. It's more about changing how we are relating to that contraction, how we're being with that contraction and that energy and the embodiment of shame that actually allows it to shift. Because if we're just doing the mindset work, we're actually kind of using that as a strategy to avoid the energy and the
Can I
feeling of it in the
challenge that?
body. Sure.
Because I think that you're right to a certain extent, but then there's also the thought and belief system that it's wrong to feel the shame, right? And so, in order to get to a point where you're comfortable processing the energy of shame, you have to start with, it's okay for me to feel this.
Yeah.
It's no longer wrong to feel this. This means something different than I thought it meant before.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I've noticed a lot of resistance from clients around looking for evidence that the opposite of what they believe is true.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Why do you think that is?
Mm. I think it's a couple things we've touched on before, but maybe there's more. But I think the main thing is, what if I'm wrong? Like, it would be better for me to believe that I'm not worthy and then be wrong about that than it would be for me to believe I am worthy and then be wrong about that. And it comes back to this idea of, like, when I went into school and I was wearing what I thought was good, and then that was invalidated and I was bullied for what I was wearing. I really believed that, like, I should have known better. I should have seen this coming, because had I known better, had I known that I didn't look good, or that this other person wasn't going to think that I looked good, then it wouldn't have hurt so bad when I was confirmed that. It hurt because I believed one thing and then was shown another.
But there's an aspect of you shaming yourself for not having seen it that way at that time.
Right.
And I feel like there's a nuance there where there's an aspect of taking ownership that's when you create a shift in your perspective. There's an aspect of taking ownership for who you are, how you see yourself, how you've been operating, which feels massively uncomfortable. And then with that comes judgment and
Mm,
more shame, and it just kind of compounds on itself, and you have to
yeah.
take it like layer by layer, you know what I
Right.
mean, to the point where you can freely shift your perspective without that added shame and judgment layering
Yeah.
itself on top.
Yeah. And I think in some way that added shame and guilt, like, I'm shaming myself for not seeing this. is kind of our way of avoiding going into what feels uncomfortable.
I agree with you.
It's shooting up into our heads. Like, I should have known better. How didn't I see this coming? As our way of not getting back to what feels really threatening and unsafe, which is at the end of the day, our own bodies and a contraction inside of our own body. The energy of it feels unsafe. And let's not make ourselves wrong for that. Because again, then we're shooting up in our heads, being like, I should know better and I should feel my feelings and blah, blah, blah. No, it's just that we have learned not to feel safe inside of our own embodied experience of something so heavy like shame. And so we have all of these unconscious strategies to try to avoid going there. And I think a big one, a big reason why a lot of people don't go there and or feel safe going there is because the times in our lives when we were younger, maybe when we did kind of get forced to go there because we didn't know any better, we got lost in it and we didn't know how to get out. And it was associated with a really, really dark, hard time in our life where we were miserable, where we felt so unseen and rejected, and we hated ourselves, and we felt unloved and disconnected. And that was perpetual and it never ended. And we never want to go back there. And we think that if we feel, we will go back there.
Something I feel like it's important for me to add in here from the spiritual perspective, which I feel allows me to better drop into this stuff a little bit deeper, is the notion that all of this is part of why you came here. And I feel like our human perspective, like you just said, teaches us that some experiences are bad or wrong to have, and that we must avoid them at all costs. And that kind of perpetuates this entire cycle that we're talking about, where as soon as you make it wrong to have an experience, then the experience becomes something that you try to avoid at all costs, and then you shame yourself for certain aspects of who you are and what you've been through, and then you feel unseen from yourself, and then you fear someone else truly seeing you, and the whole kind it exacerbates everything. And if you can hold inside of you that the entire purpose of being here is to have a wide range and spectrum of experiences so that you can learn and grow from them, it allows you to hold a little bit more compassion, which is essentially what this comes down to. And we are so terrified of showing ourselves compassion because if we show ourselves compassion, then we'll get complacent or someone else will see us in a way we don't want to be seen, or you know what I
Yep.
mean? Like, and that whole snowballs, but that's all a misinterpretation of the entire point.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. I don't even know what to add to that. Just leave it there.
Yeah, I feel like we should, like, for anyone watching or listening, Kelly and I are here having this conversation right now because we went through the darkness and we forced ourselves to look at it and feel it and learn from it. And now we can speak to it in this capacity. And we've learned how to find the safety and compassion inside of it because we slowly started to see the illusion, which is that some experiences are wrong to have and some are the only types of experiences we should be having. But there's so much value in all of it. And at the end of the day, if you can remind yourself that you came here to find the light, the hope, the compassion, the love inside of the darkness, it's not in the emptiness that you find it, or in the space that is not the darkness, you find it inside of the muck. You can only go
Yes.
from one side of the spectrum to the other if you've experienced both. Um, and being able to hold that perspective for me has allowed me to move through it in the way that I couldn't before.
Yes. Yeah. And very simply, like taking that and applying it to our topic of feeling and being unseen. I think both of us have had experiences of feeling really triggered by being or by feeling unseen. And we've both had to do our work. around that. And everything that we've talked about today have been results of our own personal analysis of and exploration and curiosity around what this really meant for us and why we were conditioned to respond the way that we did to this happening and also this desire to feel seen. And when we're talking about like the reason that we came here was to find the hope, find the love, find the connection, for everything that you just said in these dark experiences, that's exactly what we've done with everything, including the desire to feel seen and the fear of being seen. We've had to learn how to go inside of that darkness, the fear, the shame of not feeling good enough, of having a part of ourself that feels innate to who we are, finding out that that's wrong and that we are fatally flawed. We've had to go and do our work to experience the darkness of that so that we can actually find the lesson, is one part of it. Finding the lesson kind of gives it a purpose in a way. It's like, if this is happening to me, if I'm feeling shame, so much shame, so fatally flawed, what's the purpose of that? And why would that be something that my soul chose to
Yeah.
investigate and experience in this life? And then also another light that we find inside of that is through the being in the darkness and investigating it, we start to actually see and connect back with the light that was always there. We were just distracted from it when we were focusing on trying to avoid the darkness.
Well, I think shame inherently is part of it is a belief system that there is wrongness there. But if you can see that there literally is no wrongness,
Mm. And that it's okay to
right?
believe that
And that
and to
it's
trust
okay to
that.
believe that and trust that, then you can see that what is the darkness is simply the illusion of the belief system that it is wrong for this to be happening or for you to be feeling this way.
That's
And
right.
so it just allows it to kind of dissipate a little bit, and the truth of why you're really here kind of comes to light, which is that it's all welcome.
Yeah. You just made a really great point that this does expand into everything. Like, I've definitely noticed that the more that I've been willing to question my own innate wrongness, then I start to question my own interpretation of reality and the world outside of me being wrong, and then vice versa. The more that I've questioned my resistance to reality and my war on reality, telling myself stories that reality should be different than it is, and questioning that and using a lot of tools like the work of Byron Katie, where you come to question our own war on reality and see, is it true that it should be different than it is? And we start to see, no, reality should be the way that it is. And sometimes we get that quicker. Sometimes we are really married to the idea that reality should be different than it is. But the more that we practice that and the more that we see our delusion of interpreting that reality should be different than it is, and then that also bleeds over and expands into our relationship to ourself and how we perceive ourselves.
If there's one thing I learned from channeling, it's that there is no one truth.
Mm.
We tend to believe that there is, and when we feel like we've found it, we like grip onto it with a death grip, and then our entire identity becomes interwoven inside of it. And that's where the pain starts, is because if something seems wrong based on the truth that you're holding inside of you, if there's the wrongness there, then you're going to feel that kind of tension inside of you in terms of what your feeling should be versus what is unfolding as in reality. And when you can see that there is no truth, there is only perspective,
Mm.
then it allows you to begin to poke holes in your own perspective and find a different truth that you can grip onto that allows you to access more compassion, more love, or a different experience than you're currently having.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what you're doing when you're speaking to your spirit guides, when you're speaking to beings of light. they are living in a different dimensional reality with a different perspective.
Mhm.
And I think that that's kind of what we're here to learn, is that it's okay to have different perspectives from one another. And that's part of the beauty in coming here, is that each perspective allows you to anchor into a different experience and then learn from that experience and determine if that's an experience that you want to have again or not. And in that respect, you actually have a lot more control over your internal experience than you think you do.
Mm.
The control is
Yes,
inside, not
always,
outside. Coming
always.
back
Yeah,
to a previous conversation that we were having.
yeah. And control at the end of the day is in some way, shape, or form. It's, well, I guess the control of the outside is always an illusion.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there any other takeaway that you kind of have from this conversation that you want to leave people with?
Yeah.
Or does it
What
feel complete to you?
I think the main thing that I want to emphasize, because it feels like a lesson that I relearned today, and I learned it on a deeper level through this conversation,
Oh,
is that what we say is our problem is not actually what it is. Like when I say I want to feel seen, like what do I actually mean by that? Because if I can investigate and identify what it is that I actually desire, that's going to make it a lot easier to move towards it. And the same thing with the fear of being seen. When we're saying I'm afraid of being seen, then we're hiding. But that's not really what that's about. When
yeah.
we're saying that we don't want to be seen, then we're not letting people get close to us, then we're putting up walls. But again, that's not actually getting us or moving us any closer to the safety we're trying to create for ourselves. We're trying to avoid rejection, abandonment, loneliness, blah, 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 so that we can avoid our own shame. And so the solution then isn't actually hide, be inauthentic, present a certain version of myself that isn't actually real so that people will accept me, and put up walls so that people don't reject me. The solution is really to learn how to be with my shame. But we wouldn't have known that had we not actually investigated what we meant by the thing we said we wanted, or the thing that we said we were afraid of.
And then once you can learn to be with your shame, you realize that it was of your own making in the first place, right? And like taking it
Uh-huh.
another step further. And then the next time that you feel it, it doesn't feel so scary.
Yeah.
And then just shifting your perspective that way on the experience itself allows you to move through it in a way that feels a little bit less vulnerable or scary
Yeah.
or all ending.
Yeah. And then all the methods that we used to avoid our shame will just dissolve on their own
Yeah.
as a result of that.
Yeah, I feel complete with that. I don't really have anything to add.
Me too. Mic drop.
Mic drop.